Namaste to all of you. A very warm welcome to this evening's call. Friends, this evening we have decided to go back a little into the history, especially history of the Deccan region. We have with us Shri Jaikishan ji. Before I introduce Jaikishan ji, it is my duty to briefly speak about our organization Pragya Bharati, for those of you who have come for the first time. Friends, Pragya Bharati is an intellectual forum which has been working among various sections of intellectual class to bring the nationalistic perspective among them for the past 28 years. Among the founding members, our chairman, Dr. Hanuman Chaudhary, who was former chairman of BSNL, is a Padma Shri awardee. He was on our call on 25th June, as some of you may recollect, speaking about the days of emergency. He is almost 90 years and then he's relentlessly working for the cause of the glory of Bharat. And then we have Shri Ram Madhavji, who is now the National General Secretary of Bharatiya Janata Party. Then Shri V.S. Sharma ji, a pharmaceutical professional. And then two great people who are no more with us, Shri Vakati Panduranga Rao ji and Harihara Sharma garu. All these five people started Pragya Bharati about 28 years back. Friends, Pragya Bharati conducts seminars, conferences, workshops, and so many things with a singular aim of bringing the Bharatiya perspective among intellectuals. We also invest in intellectuals and try to make them champions in various fields associated with the greatness of the country. We also bring out the monthly English magazine by name Bharatiya Pragya. Those of you who have not subscribed to it, kindly do subscribe to it. And after the lockdown period is over, next week that is going to get posted for the past 3 months. And we also give an annual award, what we call as Pragya Puraskar. We award to eminent people who have worked for the glory of Bharat. And who have brought out, aspects which are very, very quintessential to the glory of the nation. For instance, Sri R.V.S. Avadhanluji is one of the recipients. He, as you all know, he was on our webinar a month and a half back. He is the chairman of Veda Bharati and he's relentlessly digitizing all Vedas. Similarly, the last recipient was Dr. Satish Reddy ji. He is now currently the scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, and he is one of the experts in the world in terms of missile navigation. So, such great eminent personalities have been awarded Bharatiya Pragya Puraskar by us. Friends, we also request you to kindly subscribe to our social media assets, be it our Twitter handle Pragya Bharati, Instagram Pragya Bharati, or Facebook Pragya Bharati. In fact, this talk is now being live streamed on our Facebook as well. And of course, our YouTube channel, where this video will be uploaded in a couple of days. You could write to us at info@pragyabharati.in with your suggestions or if you want to be part of our movement. That is brief description about our organization, friends. And we have started a series of talks in association with Salarjung Museum of Hyderabad. Salarjung Museum is probably the nation's largest collection by a single individual, and it has got some amazing collection of historical content in that. In fact, Jaikishan ji, who is the speaker today, is also a member of their board. Salarjung Museum has been in preservation work for many decades now, and though the name Salarjung is still there, but it has preserved a lot of artifacts which are pertaining to Telangana region, which the work has carried on even after Salarjung has left. So that briefly is the introduction of both organizations. And today we have amongst us Sri Jaikishan ji. He is a PhD from Usmania University, and he is a member of many organizations. He is a life member of Indian History Congress, South Indian History Congress and AP History Congress. He is also a member in INTACT and founder member director of field research in Deccan Archaeological Cultural Research Institute, Hyderabad. He is a member of the Heritage Study Group, Indian National Academy of Engineers. He researched and surveyed entire Telangana and completed a project on iron and wood steel industry in Telangana. He has identified 2,600 iron smelting and 600 wood crucible sites in the region. Friends, his pioneering work has actually hit the nail in the coffin of the Aryan invasion theory, where he has actually discovered and proved that iron usage existed in this part of the world, be it Telangana or Chhattisgarh and Godavari basin, which predated the date used by the Aryan invasion theorists, where they said iron was brought in by the invaders, whereas J. Kishan Ji and his peers who did research have disproved their theory. In fact, iron and steel actually was exported from here to North India and elsewhere. So it is not a Aryan invasion, but it is more of our own internal technology that has proved it. Today he is going to talk about, and in fact he has got a rich collection of all these artifacts that he has found in these sites actually. He did a project on forged welded iron cannons in Deccan forts. So today's topic is about the forts only, the cannons only. He's going to talk about the saga of the cannons of Deccan. So each aspect of history speaks volumes about the era in which that particular artifact was made. The cannons which are lying in the Deccan, be it the Sultanate era, be it the Vijayanagar Empire, or be it the Mughal invasion, or whatever it is. Each cannon speaks its own story, and his specialization being iron and metallurgy. How did this culture of making one of the finest cannons existed in this part of the world? Today we have completely forgotten, and we think we have to import things from Sweden and Bofors and all. But we ourselves had very rich metallurgical culture in South India, in the Deccan. So today, friends, J. Kishan Ji is going to talk to us about his findings and his research, not just on iron found in this region, but also on how the story of the cannons of the Deccan are going to speak to us. J. Kishan Ji, floor is yours.
Right, sir. Good evening to everybody, the scholars, students, research professors, and Raghuji, and Virendra, everybody. So, my presentation is on saga of Deccan cannons, the neglected beauties, the rich metallurgical heritage we have since long time. That's unknown time we have started this metallurgical work. See, this pioneering metallurgy existed in central Deccan earlier, but that's not totally identified, and dating tests are not being done. So my work on cannons is a project given by Indian National Institute of Indian National Science Academy in New Delhi in the year 2006-2008 between. I have completed that project. Is it visible to you?
Yeah.
Huh? Sir,
Yeah,
is it visible to you?
You have to share your screen, sir. Use the green button at the bottom, share screen.
Achha. Right, okay. Are you able to see? Sir?
Yes. You can start the PowerPoint.
Yeah. As I already mentioned, this saga of Deccan cannons, the neglected beauties, survey and catalog. with a due acknowledgements, I start by lecture. I joined with Professor R. Balasubramaniam, IIT Kanpur. He's no more. Department of Metallurgy and Materials Engineering. So he inspired me to study in this area of war equipment. I also thank Chairman Commission for History of Science, Indian National Science Academy, who gave the project from New Delhi, and the permissions given by the Archaeological Survey of India, New Delhi, to the Director General and Director, Department of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Andhra Pradesh, Museums, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Government of Tamil Nadu, and to my beloved students who helped me in this great endeavor, to K. Ramesh, O. Raju. The project title was Catalog and Technical Analysis of Forge Welded Iron Cannons in Deccan Forts. Project sponsored by Chairman Commission for History of Science in the National Science Academy, New Delhi. Principal investigator was Professor R. Balasubramaniam. I was a co-investigator. I did the field work totally. The main aim was catalog and analysis of existing forge welded iron cannons in Deccan forts of India. The second aim was catalog of all existing cannons, not only forge welded, all the cannons in Deccan forts. Third aim was record the conditions of the forts visited. Got several thousands of photographs of forts, cannons, and everything. The project fieldwork began in the month of August 2006, ended up by 2008. Fieldwork completed within 26 months. Forts visited state-wise: Maharashtra 37, Andhra Pradesh 53, Karnataka 39, Tamil Nadu 5 forts. Because a little part comes under Deccan.
Have you started the presentation?
I started. Are you not hearing?
No. We are not able to see your presentation. We are only seeing your screen where you have Zoom icon and your PowerPoint and other things are there.
Are you able to see the screen now?
You can see the screen, but you're not started the presentation, I think.
Yeah, I have started. Should I go for enlarging this PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah. You can start the presentation mode.
Should I share it?
Yeah, please share it. Actually, you're sharing some screen. What I suggest is you come out of the share screen now. Yeah, now you share it again.
Share the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then choose what you want to share.
Yeah, this is. Are you able to see?
Yes. Now you can start the. Yeah, now you can start the presentation.
Now, should I make it enlarged as a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah.
Are you able to see?
Yes, sir. We can see that. Now we can carry.
Are you able to hear?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I go with the comments to Professor R. Balasubramaniam, Department of Metallurgical Materials Engineering. He's no more. He died in 2009. So also profusely thanks to the Chairman Commission for History of Science, Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi. They gave the project. I also thanks for permission giving me for the taking photographs and measurements and everything of the cannons in the forts by Director General, Archaeological Survey of India, Director, Department of Archaeology Museums, Government of Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. And also I thank to my beloved students who helped me in this great endeavor, K. Ramesh, O. Raju. The project title, Catalog and Technical Analysis of Forge Welded Iron Cannons in Deccan Forts. Project sponsored by Chairman, Commission for History of Science, Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi. Principal investigator Professor R. Balasubramaniam. I worked as a co-investigator in the project. The main aim was catalog and analysis of existing forge welded iron cannon in Deccan forts of India. Second aim is catalog all the existing cannons in Deccan forts, not only forge welded, bronze and mold cannons, cast cannons, everything. The third aim was to record the conditions of the forts visited. Yes, several forts conditions also totally photographed and digitalized, kept in record. The project November 8, were completed in 26 months, forts visited statewide. Maharashtra 37, Andhra Pradesh 53, Karnataka 39, Tamil Nadu 5. Total forts visited at the end of September 2008, 134 forts. The number of forts remaining with cannons 65, forts visited without cannons 69. In addition, cannons remaining in museums and placed at various public places in the towns and cities were also catalogued. The catalog contains all types of cannons. There are several forts in the East Coast from Vizag to Chennai where no cannons are found. There is no single cannon almost. At present, there are 7 cannons in Kondapalli Fort were brought from Golconda Fort and placed in Kondapalli. The reason for this, for not finding a single cannon, was that they were destroyed in the East Coast as revealed in a document, White Government Proceedings number 912 dated 21st June 1864, recently found in Sri Krishnadevaraya University Archives, Anantapur. This proceeding is issued by the Madras government to destroy all the cannons in the various forts in personal cannons also. The total cannons catalogued: forge welded 165, bronze cannons 145, composite cannons 16, cast cannons 362. Total cannons catalogued at about 688. Later, it included another 120 cannons. In this presentation, derivation of Deccan, later medieval period, saltpeter, kinds of cannons, parts of cannons, forge welding, cast cannons, mortise system, howitzers and mortars, cannon operation and how they were used, neglected beauties of India. South of India mountains up to Nilgiri Hills. In the south, it is the largest area of the Deccan Plateau. This geographical region covers Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and northern part of Tamil Nadu, the states of South India. This is the Deccan. In the Indian history, the medieval period considered from 19th to 18th centuries, Common Era. The latter medieval period began in the 15th century, Common Era. In this period, India witnessed considerable development in metallurgy and industry of arms due to induction of artillery forces in the army. Before that, there was no induction of artillery. Artillery introduced by Western people, maybe Turkish or European. Artillery played a significant contributing factor in the mining and manufacture related metal objects. It also accelerated the processing of iron and copper alloys, especially bronze, and of various chemicals like saltpeter and sulfur. The arms industry attained particular distinction throughout the country. Cannons reveal metallurgical engineering expertise of medieval Indian smiths. Gunpowder, advancement in warfare, origin and development of artillery drastically altered the warfare and fort construction and influenced life in general, the social, economic, and political space. Saltpeter and gunpowder. Gunpowder consists of mixture of three ingredients: nitro, potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur. Arthashastra wrote in the 300 BCE mentioned Saurikalvana, saltpeter, and use of fire in the wars. Different applications for different compositions were used. Strong cannon powder was 4:1:1. That's 4 parts of potassium nitrate, 1 part of charcoal, 1 part of sulfur. Shukraniti, a 8th century text, provides 5 parts of nitro and 1 part of sulfur and 1 part of charcoal. This is strong, literally. Saltpeter called Saurikalvana in Sanskrit, Shoranamak in Urdu, Surekaram in Telugu, gunpowder called Turbi in Urdu, Nallamandu in Telugu, because it's a black powder. Early fire devices. Fire is used in war since very long time. Ramayana mentions of Agnivada, Ramayana Mahabharata. Naftandas, naphtha throwers in Egypt. Atishbazi, fire playing devices, that's in Persia. Hukai Atishbazi, vessel filled with fire. Manjanik, Maghrabis, Ardas, elaborate tension machines for throwing fire arrows and fire pots. You can see in many movies also this throwing fireballs in the war scenes. Charkha, a large crossbow catapult worked in tension by means of pulleys and ropes. Different firearms were introduced in wars in medieval period. Top, Firangi means cannon. Zarbuzan, howitzers. Sambruk or Zaznal, mortars. Hatnal or Gazanal, elephant carriers. Narnal, guns carried by men that would be used in emasculations of the fort walls. Banduk, gun used in war by the soldiers. This called parts of cannons. The front is known as a muzzle. This is called bore. This is muzzle swell. This muzzle swell, muzzle, bore, and the chamber. This is a vent hole. This is cascable. This neck, knob or button, trunnion, rim base. The simple parts of the cannon. There are 2 kinds of cannons: muzzle loaded, breech loading. Breech loading cannons introduced in late 16th century by Bijapur and Golconda kings, which were failure. See, actually, here in this picture, shown this ball is placed inside. Ball never placed inside. It's only kept in the front side of the muzzle, and it's closed with the wax or clay, soft clay. Inside they used to fill the gunpowder here. That's called cartridge. This is called vam. Then this is a vent hole. They used to flint here. They also put here some powder. So that fire ignites inside the breech. So there a combustible energy will create it, and with the fire and force, the ball pushed out. This is called breech loading cannons, which are useless, and because breech was not always so sealed, so they became useless. They are in Golconda and Hausa forts. How they were used, the long bore, how they used. The first cannons Cannon bore was cleaned with a cylindrical-like wooden piece dipped in a water that was covered with a goat skin. Then the breech of the cannon was loaded with the gunpowder with the help of a wooden bamboo tube. This is called cartridge. Cartridge contained an exact measure of black powder. The amount of powder would be matched the weight of the solid shot or the weight of the cannonball. 4 pounds of cannonball would match 4 pounds of black powder. So not totally it was filled with gunpowder, not like that, because there should be a big vacuum should be there. There the combustible energy will create it. First the cartridge was filled, then hemp or wad was fixed, and finally a shot was fixed on the muzzle, and that was sealed with a wax or soft clay so that air should not enter into the chamber. Then the vent or match hole was cleaned and filled with same powder. After adjusting the cannon to the exact position, the commandant will issue the order for firing. The match was lit by the firemen and they would immediately jump into the water sump near the cannon. Otherwise, they will break their eardrums. All the big cannons on the battlements were provided with water sumps. This total operation would sometimes require 4 to 5 with the 4 to 5 people help, but for a heavy cannon, the number could be doubled. The effect of fire from the cannon. If the gunpowder combination was made into an optional proportion of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, that is 75% of nitrate and 13% of charcoal and 12% of sulfur. In a metal bore cannon made of adequate strength, then the firing of the mixture produces suddenly 3,000 times bulk of gas, nitrogen, oxides of carbon and sulfur. Then the temperature suddenly reaches around 3,880 centigrade. That explosion conducted in a place known as chamber that will propel by throwing the ball out. The cannonball effect is not much considered, only the fire it produces. The fire like a bulb, it fall on the enemy lines. If it is fell on the skin, they'll burn. So simple wounds also not healed so easily. See, there is a sump here. This is a cannon and live. This is Basav Kalyan near on the way to Bombay. Sump in Jagachal Fort, Karimnagar. Design, very wonderful design, constructed this sump. Cannons were made in different times. There was an forge welding technique. In the later medieval Mughal Turkish system, large cast sections were screwed together. Akbar's artillery used a mold system for cannon. The latter technology of the mortise system, the cannon was cast solid and then the bore was drilled out. Now we are going the beauties of India, forge welded cannons. This marvelous work done by our Smith engineers. These will depict the Smith technological skill. The forge welding technique used in cannon making is purely an indigenous technology. Indian artisans developed this method of forge welding. Skilled labor was involved in the process. Many cannons were made possible to use in the wars as the metal was abundantly available in the Deccan. The construction of the cannon, forge welded cannon. This is the barrel. Actually, first they make a mandrel, wooden mandrel shape. Around that they fix the staves, long bars. They join together. On that they fix the hoops. This is called as a shrink fitting method. When iron is hot, so they fix. When it's cool, it expands. It shrinks and it cools. When it cools, it fixed. When it's hot, it shrinks. So with the string fitting method, they used to fix this bar hoops on the bar. This is called mandrel. And afterwards, they remove that mandrel and see this called the basic structure of the four-jeweled cannon. So backside, fix the base plate. So this is very wonderful. This bars, they keep something extra about the cannon size. So they fix base plate on the backside. This is called muzzle faces. Beautifully they decorate. These are all the staves you can see inside. Here the staves turn like beautiful design. Here you can see rings, not 1, 2, 3 rings are there because they wanted to strengthen the barrel, because otherwise blast and broken, it will be very dangerous. That's why it will be strengthened with 2 or 3 sets of rings. Forge welding cannon in the top of Hyder Burj in Bijapur Fort, Karnataka. This might be the world's largest ordnance piece. Its length is 36.5 feet. Length about 932 centimeters and muzzle 97, bore 30, and back side also very lengthy, heavy, they made it. And with a different technique you can see here, it is not like common trunnions. I'll explain afterwards. Forge welding cannons at Basav Fort. You can see this huge cannons, 60 tons. This in Bijapur. See its face, you can see here. The staves also easily visible. But outside, if you see, you won't find that there is a forge welded cannon, because it ruptured here. We can say how many times it's used, how many times it ruptured the vent hole as well as the bore. Babar's Khazana was cast in 2 pieces. The technology brought from Central Asia. This is called screw fitting cannons. Not 1, 2, 3. I have seen 3, 4 screws, 4 pieces are screwed together. But this was very poor in operation. When it was blasted, so it was shaking, all the screws will become loose. So Babar, after Akbar kept it aside. These are cannons and Mughal paintings. Babar, first battle of Panipat. Casting halo cannon in 1 piece started from Akbar's time. This is called mold system. This is a mold. Even molds are still there in the museums. This Jaipur Museum, you can see these molds. So he introduced the easiest system. Akbar attacking the Ranthambore fort. So he's here. He built a mud bastion here, and from there he defied the fort. Here this is actually Chittorgarh, how he captured. The mine blasted and fort was broken. He entered in the fort. See, Aurangzeb seized of Bijapur fort in 1686. He might have brought more than 1,000 cannons along with his troops. This is Golconda, captured by what was siegecraft of 1681 by Aurangzeb. He is here, his total army outside the fort, inside. So many cannons were used. There are about 1,400 plus cannons were used by Golconda forces. Decline the control over the artillery and gunpowder trading caused the collapse of Mughal economy after Aurangzeb. That led to their downfall of the great empire. Why Mughals downfall started? Because they handed over the gunpowder trading rights to the British East India Company. They got the monopoly over the purchase and making and transporting, selling, everything rights were on that. But that was not known to Aurangzeb. After the death of Aurangzeb, it was known to the people. So Indian people, they could not get the gunpowder sufficiently that cost, and so many million tons of gunpowder was exported to England for their wars. Latter technology was mortar system controlled, introduced by 1800 Common Era. The solid cannon was cast at first and next drilled out the bore. There were two units. One is casting furnace and second is drilling complex. This is mortar system cannons, one in Hyderabad, one in Vijayawada. So it's not drilled out the bore. So this is in Nirmal. There are two sets of gun foundry. Two gun foundries are there. One in outside the fort, one in inside the fort. People doesn't know what it is exactly. Nobody has taken care. Now it's not in this condition. It's totally dilapidated condition, and this land being given to the BC SC ST welfare scheme, and they construct the houses around this. They don't know the historical importance of this place. Because the district did not take any steps to preserve this. Another two are there, but they are also not this one. On the hillock, this is actually drilling complex. This is Hyderabad gun foundry. This is Jaipur and Jodhpur gun foundries. Drilling complex still existing in Jaipur and Jodhpur, Jaigarh. These are our beats, drilling complex beats. Cannon operation. Early cannons was they kept in a plate, wooden plate, and they constructed a round ditch for guidation of the cannon. So it was very difficult for them to move this. These are all very few number we can find in the forts. Now later they developed with the trunnions. So widespread cannon operation on the bastions was with the swell and pivot. Swell and pivot fixed to the trunnions. This is called pivot. This pivot. And this is called swell. So this is called trunnion. The swell is fixed. Trunnion is fixed in swell. So this on pivot. Pivot will it rotate. Actually, they put some greasy leather washers here to rotate very freely. So easy movement will be there. So you can say rim base, this is called. See, this is in still alive. These cannons are in even now can be operated. This cannon is very big cannon, 60 tons in Bijapur. See, this trunnion was not functioning properly. Then they rebuild this. See, twice, two cannons are there in front of Bijapur Museum. An innovative technology in medieval period was detachable trunnion, one stone pedestal pivot system in Yadgiri and Bijapur forts in Karnataka. It's very peculiar, innovative system they introduced in the cannon operation, nowhere in the world. It was quite amazing. They fixed this, they forged this kind of system. In between, they placed the detachable trunnion. This was fixed in this on the stone. Here you can see detachable trunnion. It's no more in the fort now. It's disappeared totally in the Yadgiri fort. So only cannons are remaining. How this operation is very wonderful. Here, under the stone, they cut this a square cut and they fix the post with lead. And underneath they put a circular ditch. This clamp, what you call covered with iron again. This rotates the stone 360 degrees around the place. So it was easy. Why this system? This was only to lift the cannon up with this dents one side, and they fixed the what you call gunpowder and make it ready for blasting. A few massive four-wheeled cannons in Deccan forts. This very wonderful massive cannons, Karnataka, when this Nizamabad, Naugasi. This is in Ramgiri Fort. This is Naugasi again. This is a photograph I took in '79. This very long cannon, again 36 feet, Gulbarga. This live cannon, it is rotated and it can be used up and down. So this is a massive cannon in Bijapur, Bidar. This is called Landa Hasar. Is weight about 46 tons, 47 tons. A huge massive cannon, four-wheeled cannon, they placed the bores in Bijapur, South Bastion Scotland, and with beautiful designs. These are four-wheeled and engraving work, inlay work. Four-wheeled cannons with decorative work called koftugari, incrustation of one metal and another metal for decorative purpose. The cannon in the Basav Fort. This very beautiful cannon, live cannon, you can see. So every part is totally decorated. It's a hole also ruptured, means it's used several times. Its mouth also ruptured. It shows the use of this cannon. Base plate of a cannon Udayagiri Fort in Maharashtra. Udgir, not Udayagiri. Howitzers and mortars. This is very wonderful. It has howitzer means a short cannon, usually with a medium muzzle velocity. It has a high trajectory. These were also called as mortars. We can see the gradual scientific development in its reduction of size. These were used near the fort walls. So they put like this and it is used to fell down outside. So these howitzers were used for the same purpose. Early four-wheeled howitzers, Zarbuzans and mortars are Zambruks found in the forts. So projectiles shot like that of mortar, these were used when the fortification walls could not so easily be penetrated by guns. Mortars are Zambruk, shot high trajectory because those were used to reach target behind the fortification walls. The range that of the cannon, bombs were usually fired from the mortars. These are all four-wheeled mortars, beautifully decorated. This is called mortars in Chennai. This is small. What are the appendants? Cannons and guns required several appendices like shots means cannonballs, gunpowder carriers, and flash, bore cleaning equipment, and several other things. So stone also used in cannonballs. Iron also. These are all forge-welded and man-made, not cast. Casting is very late. These are all gunpowder carriers. In the war, they used to carry gunpowder in these carriers. One is in my personal collection, this one. See, these cast cannons, cast shots. This is exact pounds measurement. These are all stone again. These are grape shots. In the mortars, they use the grape shots. This British East India Company introduced this. But Indian also innovative ideas in composite and multi-metal and multi-barrel cannons. Indian innovative ideas, composite cannons, multi-metal and multi-barrel cannons. Golconda Kings, multi-metal, multi-metal cannons made by Golconda Kings in the last moment from 1674 to 1679. They constructed and built around 5 cannons: Azza Paigar and Khila Kush, Fateh Haber, Atishbash, and another cannon is there. I don't know its name. But these are all one engineer, Muhammad Ali Arab. He made all these cannons in the Golconda Fort. There is an inscription on the cannon that reveals his name and everything. Bilgrami wrote about this cannon in the landmarks of Deccan. This is Azza pipe. This is actually they kept copper on this copper decoration, inside iron, upper side only bronze. This also inside iron, outside bronze. Here also you can see inside iron, outside bronze. This is the mass of the warfield. It's a 55 tons of bronze cannon. These two cannons were cast at Ahmednagar. One engineer from Turk. So one collapsed, one lost in the Krishna River after the war of Talikota or Banyati. Only this remains. Actually, Murari Pandit, when he conquered Ahmednagar, captured, so he brought this from Ahmednagar, 230 kilometers, and kept it and specially constructed the bastion. Dalhousie wanted to take this to England. He tried from main bastion to this bastion has actually fallen down, but they could not move. Robert Clive tried to use this cannon and he operated successfully. This multi-barrel cannons like guns, it's a very wonderful system they adopted. Even multi-barrel Jodhpur, one single lit of 5, both the cannons will fight. Cannons on the wheels. These are European again. At the beginning there was actually Turks they brought on the wheels, and again Britishers. There is total modification, change in the advancement. The beginning there was only little change in their method of operation. They modified indigenous technological methods. Gradually they adopted the new technological methods, those we can observe below. See these Baburs, these modern cannons, Royal Artillery Historical Trust. This is the type they use. This from British Museum collection photos. The local made British cannons in India. These are all you can see in Madras, Chennai, St. George Fort. This is in Hyderabad, Golconda Artillery Center. These are all in, these are all bead metal. They cause this total carrier. Neglected beauties of India. The cannons are most neglected artifacts. They are subjected to damage and defacement. Most of the bronze and iron cannons cut and stolen due to the metal cast. Because we don't have heritage concept that should be built among the people. This cannon in Kandahar, why did they keep? Because people may take away. That's why they kept like this. It's a forged welded cannon. See, it is in a dustbin, very huge cannon forged welded in Bijapur. See, this is in Elgin Fort. This is in Parinda Fort. This is in Gulbarga Fort. People don't know about the value and historical importance of these artifacts. See, this buried. This as well cut and thrown from the fort is from Medak. This buried inside, we removed all that clay and dust, everything. This in Malikhead again, same type. They cut and took away one part and unknown part is remaining. They used as a what you call water flow, rain pipe. They take away this what you call base plate. This is from Nasik Satana Revenue Office. There is a cannon. See, this in Golconda Fort. This is in Golconda Fort. Still it is there. It's buried in the backside of the ASA office in Golconda Fort. This in Naya Killa in Golconda. This in Jagitial Fort. There were about 120 cannons. All are taken away, now remaining with 30 or 40 cannons. When I cataloged 51, now remaining only 44. So this is a fate for heritage artifacts. Photos from various museums in Deccan states, travel acts like Thevenard Bernier, Tavernier, and William Havert. History of Technology in India by Amulya Kumar. Saga of Indian Cannons by R. Balasubramaniam. Warfare and Weaponry. Humans and Koff created this book. Army of Indian Mughals. William Irwin. Gunpowder and Firearms by Iqtidar Alam Khan. Engines of War, Wilkinson. Iron in Ancient India by Panchanan Yogi. Journals like Indian Journal of History of Science. They took out 2 thematic journals in 46 volume. So that's very wonderful volumes. Thank you very much, respected scholars, professors, and scientists and friends. Thank you. Any questions?
You can
Sir?
stop the screen share, sir. You can stop the screen share. There is a button on top which says stop screen share. That you can click it.
Screen?
Stop screen share. You see a red indicator on top.
Yeah.
You can stop the screen share.
Okay, sir.
No, it's still seen actually. Okay, I'll stop it. That's okay. I'll stop it. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Kishan ji, thanks a lot, sir, for your wonderful presentation. Walking through some of the things which are there in the plain sight, but people don't realize the deep history of each of these cannons and how it played a significant part. As can be very clearly seen, we had a lot of metallurgy and technology in this country. Though it was imported from outside, we had our own indigenous way of forging and casting and other things. We developed it. Somehow it looks like that culture of innovation and culture of trying to do seems to have not existed in this country in the current era. Now we are buying howitzers and everything from abroad. Why we are unable to do it? I mean, when we had Wood's steel, I think another research that you have done on Wood's steel, only we had woods in the world. From here they copied and taken it abroad. So why do you think India is today so, what do you say, bad in terms of metallurgy and all these things? How do you think the Western world...
Archaeology is poor.
Pardon?
Archaeology is poor, very poor. No, particularly Telangana is not at all taking care about the department, and they changed the name also. So now it's almost closed, archaeology. So since it's closed, there won't be any excavations, no dating tests, nothing can be done. So we can prove, if the dating tests, excavations are going on, can prove that Indian metallurgy is very old in Telangana region. Even before Indus Valley, I'm telling you, iron was used in Deccan. Not contemporary to iron in Indus Valley. Already the excavation date at Central University given BC 2755.
Okay, but,
so it shows.
But I think normally people believe 1200 BC, I think, is the Iron Age, right?
No, that's wrong. That's what I'm telling you.
No, but the popular narrative today in the historical...
BC 1200.
1200 BC is the popular narrative.
Yeah. But
So that is,
nowadays,
your discovery shows it is even prior to Indus Valley civilization.
yeah.
So that defeats two things. That means Indus Valley civilization was defeated by Aryans, and so they came into South India.
Not
South
Aryans. That's a wrong conception again.
Correct,
There was
correct.
no
So,
attack on them. There
yeah.
was no
So you
wars.
are proving that there was technology in South India before the so-called migration happened.
Yeah, that's the before
Right?
Aryans, before Vedic period
Yeah.
itself. There is a iron production and woods making also. And one more thing I'll tell you.
Can you mention some sites where you've discovered these things?
Hmm?
Can you mention some of the sites where you found this pre-Harappan?
Yeah, that's Gachibowli, Central University campus. Gachibowli,
Okay.
Central University campus, they excavated 2-3 burials. Amazing dates.
One is, I think,
OSL.
as soon as you enter the gate to the right side, there is one burial, right?
Inside the right side, if you go, there is a burial site. There is one minhar. Actually, that stage being grown up means, so we got good iron implements to cut the stones, the shape we like. And further, if you go beyond to that, there are such burials where stones were not properly cut. And still, very earlier period, the burials system was totally different. But if you look at this megalith burial sites, I have seen hundreds of burial sites. I have studied and what you call cataloged. I wrote a paper on that also. So that burials gives a perfect date of iron usage in India. So people are surprising, of course, whatever they dig out and whatever they are finding in the burials, particularly in central Deccan. They, Naikund, near Nagpur. So there are 2-3 sites they excavated. So they find iron implements very strong. Even they are telling that carbon metal also they found, means wood steel. Wood steel 1500 means there is a possibility because wood's implements were used in pyramid construction. Egypt also produced iron, but very late, BC 600. But Egypt pyramids constructed 3000 years ago, BC. So that time they used iron and steel implements from India. They specially mentioned. This reveals in the excavation reports also in Egypt. So Wilkinson, Ferguson, several people. Actually, Mr. Day was there in the excavation works. Who worked? He was in charge of Indian iron production centers in the East India Company in 1800. So he stated that Indian iron is quite ancient.
So, but then if so much of evidence is there, why are these people, Bipin Pal, Romila Thapar and all these people, why are they still sticking on to this, Iron Age as 1200 BC or whatever?
Northern people, they never look into the South. They never think about South is there.
No,
in
but
their view,
they should have
South of
found
India,
evidence.
there is no country for them.
No, I'm saying they should have found evidence of iron implements from South India in the northern sites also, right? They should have found them.
Of course, Northern India there is, but very late, not so earlier like South India. See, this megalith culture, when it started, so this when it has started, who has started is unknown to us. Only because if you go for dating tests, we can go back. Even woods also, who invented, who discovered arrowheads, particularly arrowheads which were used in the Thermopylae war. See, he mentions about Herodotus. Beware, the so sharp arrowheads used by Indian soldiers, thus breaking the helmets. So such sharp arrowheads were used BC 500 itself. So means earlier to that, even Sushruta, he mentioned about the blades, white iron, he mentions. In a small crucibles, he made implements. 28 surgery blades he discovered. Present modern surgery world added only 3 to that 28. Now 31 blades they are using. So means Indian surgery was famous because of iron and woods both. And short, see, one place Pliny says that no, it's very costly metal. We don't need to buy further. We are paying 100 ingots, 100 gold ingots for single one ingot from India. So in one parliament also, Roman parliament also took the decision further, we should not buy any more from India, iron or woods. Ships load of coins came to India. Indian gold came out of our iron and steel industry. Nobody has developed this outlook.
So, where are these mines? Obviously, they must be mining for all this material in Deccan only, right?
Iron is rightly found, we can find on the surface itself. No need to mine. Only simple crowbar is enough to break the stones and bring and pulverize, wash it and use for smelting. So very simple, everywhere in Deccan you can see. In particularly Karimnagar, Adilabad, beyond Adilabad and Chhattisgarh, all these places, even Orissa, plenty of iron. They simply not to go for mining in deep. Here, hillocks itself with iron. So, banded magnetite, isorise lateritic ore, both are available on the surface itself. So, millions and trillions of tons being produced in this region, and that was sent to several countries. Even 1750, when they were constructing the first bridge on Thames in England, Indian iron was used totally because it's a rust-free iron. Nowhere in the world this type of iron also not produced. Our Professor Balasubramaniam rediscovered that metal and gave it to Bhilai. Now the rails are laying down between Visakhapatnam and Rajahmundry. New lanes. This phosphoric iron, phosphorus protect the metal and from corrosion, so they are using it.
So, but what happened to this knowledge, sir? Today, we are importing from China, we are importing from the West, but we don't have that forgery knowledge. We have forgotten.
Still is there, but all the world top metallurgists are Indians, wherever you go in any country. See, Banaras University metallurgy department is very strong. It has produced thousands of students, and all over the world they are working. But India could not invest, not having that potentiality. But technology is there, knowledge is there. British suddenly after 1857 War of Independence, they banned all the sword making and woods making centers and they closed. In 1862, 65, they imposed forest laws in the country and they protected forests only for their personal railway purpose, and they totally closed this native iron industry because their iron was not selling in the markets of India. People are not interested to buy Sheffield iron in India. Even several times they mentioned in 1700 beginning and 1800 ending also. Repeatedly East India Company requested British East India Company not to send any more iron to India. Because all these cannons rust free, you can see. It's only on the open air with the air, water, rain, sunlight, everything goes on. It's not rusting. Scales are not coming out.
So normally, only the pillar in Qutub Minar is mentioned a lot. That is a rust-free pillar. But I think even
and there is another pillar. Yeah. There is another pillar at Malwa. And there are so many pillars I have mentioned. Actually, I completed one book on iron wood steel industry in northern Telangana. The forgotten metal craft. So from ore to sword, the title, and so that's coming out soon. Only concentrated in Telangana. And the most forgotten metal craft. Nobody knew. I got in my collection a good number of ingots, woods ingots, at about 60, 65 ingots. I purchased, I worked on my own, with my own money, with, it's my pioneering work almost.
Why do you think these Bahmani kings could produce so many, or the Mughals, they produce so much of metallurgy, whereas the other Hindu kingdoms of the Deccan, be it Vijayanagar, others, could not match them? Did they not have technology, or what was the issue? How do you view it?
I tell you one thing, sir. There is a description of several cannons in Gandikota fort. No single cannon is available now. Huge, massive cannons. Even Vijayanagar also was there. Bahmanis, when they attacked, after War of Talikota in 1565, they collapsed entire Vijayanagara kingdom. Even extreme south, all under the control of the British, the orders issued to destroy all the cannons into scrap, and they made it scrap and sold it in the market. So there is no evidence. Just because this area is protected by Nizam, which is Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Telangana, by the grace of God, we remained with a little number of cannons. Otherwise, 14,000 cannons, 1,400 means 2,400 cannons were used in Golconda War. That's the fate of our people. So, any questions, any more, sir?
Yeah, sorry.
చెప్పండి సార్.
Somebody is sharing the screen, I think. You are sharing the screen, sir? No.
Yeah, screen.
I'll just stop the screen share.
Yeah.
I'll remove the screen.
Anybody's?
That's better. Yeah, that's fine. So I think we'll ask Vijay Kumar ji wanted to ask a question. Vijay Kumar ji, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi.
Vijay Kumar ji, you can unmute and ask the question.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, sir. This is Vijay Kumar.
Yes, sir.
Sir, is there any evidence during the cannons used during the Kakatiya period, sir? Because I heard the cannons were used for the first time in the battle of the Kakatiya spirits only.
Sir, I could not follow. Kakatiya period?
Sir,
He's saying during Kakatiya period were the cannons used.
1323 battle.
No. Introduced only 1372. After the fall of Kakatiya dynasty. First Vijayanagara and Bahmani.
No.
In the country itself.
I heard first it is used in the Kakatiya period only in 1323 by this Ulugh Khan.
No, there was no
versus Ulugh Khan.
No. There is only catapults, fireballs.
Only fireballs, not cannons.
Not cannons.
So, in which war first these cannons were used? Besides this Babar
Telangana war between Bahmanis and Vijayanagara. First Bahmanis used because of Turkish knowledge, and they used 4-jeweled cannons and Bahmanis were defeated in that war, and Bukharaya used the cannons. This mentioned. Actually, the soldiers who died of the cannonball also given some land grants, the family. So that's a record. But what the North Indian people says, North Indian historian says only Akbar, Babur brought the cannons to India. Not that. Earlier to that.
14th century AD only they have used it.
Yeah.
When I was working in the department, I am a retired deputy director in the Department of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Telangana, sir.
Okay. Your name, sir?
Vijay Kumar Yadav. Vijay Kumar Yadav. I was the first deputy director of the Telangana government. I worked only for 6 months only. By that time, we have collected one cannon, which was collected in the cellar, very close to the Moose River bank. At least from 30 feet depth, we have collected that cannon. Through the police department, we brought it to our department. And it is in the department only, sir. We have erected it within the compound, in the gun foundry area.
I have not recorded, catalog this cannons.
That is the reason. It is in the 2015 period. 2015.
Okay.
2015, when I was working there, I myself went and brought this cannon and erected there. I have seen this Bijapur cannon also, sir. Very fine. Sir, have you found any iron smelting sites in Anantapur district area?
There are. The Anantapur, Chittoor.
So many smelting sites were there in Anantapur
district. But very late. That's a different smelting system. There are ash heaps are there in the forest. They smelt iron with first with firewood. Then they smelted with charcoal. So the systems, Dachapalli Kaifiyat describes very.
In the Karutlapalli area and in Nasanakota, Karutlapalli, Nasanakota, and Gulapalam,
several places
collected some iron lumps, which were some heavy lumps. It indicates it may be some iron smelting site.
Because the system itself was quite different from ancient system.
Okay.
The furnaces they did not construct. They used firewood. Why? How they adapted that system? I don't know. But that's why so much of iron lumps were remaining in the forest.
Yes. We have also not come across any furnaces in that iron smelting.
No, there are no furnaces. Only ash mounds.
Yes.
You might have seen ash mounds here.
Yes, ash mounds. Yes, ash mounds. But very
17th century Kaifiyat, Dachapalli Kaifiyat describes very detailed about these iron smelting sites.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Again, goods also not seen elsewhere except in Tamil Nadu, Salem and Karnataka, Kuttihosalli and some other places. But that also very quite different from Telangana iron.
Yes, sir. That Gachibowli megalithic burial sites, carbon dating is around 2400 BC.
Not carbon dating, they did. OSL dating.
TCL.
No, optical is stimulated dating. That's OSL.
Some Reddies are from NGRI. I think he's a scientist in NGRI. He also participated in this dating method.
Yeah.
But they have published an article also on that.
Yeah.
In that they have mentioned it is 2400 BC.
2550.
550.
550. One is 700 in another place it came, but that's not true.
Dr. Pullara also participated in that, no? In the text questions, megalithic.
That burial site itself is a wonderful site because upper burial date is 1950, lower burial date is 2550.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, that is about matured Harappan period, right?
Matured Harappan period. So
mature Harappan period.
Yeah, there are sword pieces, crowbars, so many things they recovered.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of evidence staring in front of us. Still, our textbooks still talk about Aryan invasion theory and all.
Aryan
we throw out
invasion
all
theory
this.
is a fake theory, sir.
Yeah, I know, but that's how the politics are playing around.
Only this
Anybody
Eurocentric
touches
theory
it, yeah, anybody touches the subject topic immediately syllabus, they say it is Bhagwa Karan, it is like saffronization. Nobody wants to even look at the scientific evidence. That's the sad part of it.
Actually, this totally developed through Euro-centered concepts. So our JNU or Aligarh schools also with the same concept developed. So they won't come out of their own rings, and they never do any field work also. Very little field work they do. They would work on only research papers.
They just depend on Google searching and all.
Yeah.
Well,
But I
it.
very extensive.
Yeah. 2,600 sites you have gone and seen. It is amazing, actually. Very large amount of research that you have done. Very commendable. And as you know, J. Kishanji, we, Prajna Bharati, had conducted a 2.5-day program based out of Karimnagar. We called it Telangana Vaibhavam. Where we brought out... Correct. That's what I'm telling the audience. Where you presented this as well, the iron related things. So we try to showcase the type of history, archaeology, technology which is there, but then it is not presented to the public. It has been hidden by the successive governments. So we try to present it to the general public, the greatness of this particular land, the richness of the technology in those areas. In fact, Panduranga Rao also, Professor Panduranga Rao also came, presented the stones of Ramappa temple, the floating stones, bricks of Ramappa. So several aspects we have actually covered it. The rich scientific knowledge that is there in Deccan, we covered it during that time. But I think governments will have to take a lot of initiative to spread this across. And it is a very sad story you're talking that archaeology is being shut down. I think our future depends on what we can discover from our past. If you want to say something on to the government, what is your advice to the government, sir?
Government, actually, central government is funding. At least that money should be spent directly for the archaeology, for excavations and dating. So as Maharashtra government has taken a lot of measurements and they rebuilt, renovated several forts, as well as they're conducting the excavation works. And the dating test. Dating test is very costly. I want to do several dating tests on my material, but it's too costly. Recently, I'm collaborating with one professor in, what to call that country? He is from University College of London, Tilur Ehran. So he sent that ingot material to US. The dating test came on. They are doing metal dating tests. Metal. This is the first time in the world. So he gave the date about 600 years back. Means 1357, 1360 between his telling. 50, 60. So the iron ingots are collected about 60 in one place. We're paying a lot of money. So these dating tests are required for us. There are no good labs. Though labs are there, very huge queues there, very costly, 30 to 70,000 you have to spend for a test. Even Archaeological Survey of India, Geological Survey of India, they have, but it's very rare to get an opportunity to go along with them. Like me people, they can't go. I can't go with them because it's very difficult. Though I am collaborating with the DMR labs for analysis and I collaborated with the Kalpakam, they did some analysis because they are interested in metallurgy, they did so. And I'm also collaborated with INE. I did so many analysis tests, even in University of Sciences, they did some work. Several institutions, they did some work. So
but
only
essentially government has to invest. Essentially,
government has to
invest.
invest lot of money for at least Telangana should have one lab as well as a lot of money for preservation and conservation of the archaeological sites. Several sites being bulldozed, we could not do. No, I recorded no 2,600 iron smelting sites. Half of it has vanished now. So you can't go and see except my what you call
Photographs.
GPS numbers. Only GPS numbers will indicate that there was a site. So this is a pathetic condition. Government immediate steps should take now. At least Konasamudram is there where it was epicenter for production and trading and everything. That should be preserved, those sites. Konapuram, Konasamudram, where immense foods was produced. It's a record in the world. Millions and trillions of ingots they produced and marketed throughout the world. Such industrial sites must be preserved. Coral industry, so many industries were there. Bronze, those must be preserved. Only central government is interested, and there are some centers. But if the government involved, that would be better. The Shokram community.
I think Jagishanji, your signal is breaking. Hello? Your signal is breaking, sir. Jagishanji, your signal is breaking.
My signal is breaking, right?
Hello? I think he lost the signal, it looks like. I think he'll come back. We'll wait for him.
Closing.
Yeah. Now you're fine. Now you're fine. Yeah. Fine. So I think let's take the next question. Prashant ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, Jai Kishan ji. I have two questions right now. Basically, we are not using cannons in present day war or present day military stuff, right? Technology has been improved, and we have so many missiles, airships, all kind of technological weapons are there with us. So, what cannons are teaching us, and how we can able to improve our, military strategy and everything with the, the background we have from the behind.
The evolution of war equipments is nothing but evolution of war equipments. See, first bow and arrow, then swords, then firearms, fire was used, then cannons replaced with the shotguns and handguns, flint guns, and actually after flint, different types of gun cotton has been developed. Gradually, this development has been continuing 1300 onwards. Yeah, 8 and 900, particularly 1300 onwards. Till date, there is a lot of improvement in war equipments. And present day, can't imagine what development is there in warheads and war equipments. Re-entry vehicles are there. So many missiles also, missile carriers will go and drop and come and join again. So there's re-entry vehicles. This is very amazing equipment. From here to can fire to any of the places, 700, 800, 1000 kilometers. So our equipments change, but we can understand how the technology is developed. Processing of the metals, processing of the chemicals, how they were used, how they were prepared. Even today, we are using same turbi in our firecrackers. So Ajmer is a main center. Still, they are producing the same old method of gunpowder. So it teaches us continuity is there in war equipment. That's development is there again. Earlier there was only bow and arrow. Bow and arrows changed by 1200. Totally only swords. And after cavalry has came in the scene, earlier there was chariots disappeared, horses came in the force, then cannons. Then totally British developed guns and missiles also used by our Tipu Sultan. That's called rockets, fire rockets. This wonderful development, fire rockets. Rocket we use in Deepavali crackers. Same rockets, same type of rockets we built and used. So the development you can see in some technology, maths, thinking. See the innovative technology and stone pedestal and the stone rotating 360 degrees. It's a quite amazing thing. So these are all not developed such way in European countries. Europeans, they learn from India. Many things they learn from India. Again, they blamed us. As we are poor. Our development cannot be tolerated by them. As well. So, they did not rule over India. Right, sir? Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant ji.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to all the scholars and friends.
Jai Kishan ji, there are a few more questions. I think you'll have to bear with us. Santosh ji, please go ahead. Santosh ji.
Thank you, sir. My name is Santosh. Jai Kishan ji, thanks a lot for that excellent session. That was very, very informative. So I heard, Giridhar ji was saying that, this definitely should be incorporated into our history textbooks, definitely into our science textbooks. But I think we were looking at it from Delhi's NCERT point of view. But sir, can this be incorporated into our state syllabus? Because I think our, the Deccan region and all these other places, can this be somehow incorporated into the state education system? So at least the people in this area benefit from this. My question is, I think how can we bring people who are in the education system to such a forum like this so that, they can get the benefit of knowing about this?
Already CBS introduced what you call NCERT introduced this metallurgy chapters in 11th and 12th. So our state government should take steps to introduce such kind of science and technology, ancient science and technology. Not only one area. I speak about one single area, but there are other areas like cotton weaving, carpets, leather industry, paper industry. Paper was introduced in 1200 onwards. Paper was very much used. Total Mughal documents are there because of the paper. They bought from Kurutla in Karimnagar district. So they put an indent for paper in Kurutla. So they took bought arms from Nirmal and Nizamabad. He sent, Akbar sent his emissary, allow him to buy arms. So there are documents. See, Mughal entire rule is Kagas ki Raj. They used paper. So those things should be brought to the notice of the students. See, one should introduce all these things. Now there are so many changes. Nothing has been changed. I taught for 30 years in a degree, 32 years in a degree college. There is no change in our textbooks. Now, where we go for change?
Yeah, I mean, we have completely killed the innovation and research minds of the students. They just
Yeah.
mug up the syllabus and vomit in the exam. That's it. Very sad, very sad. One small incident I wanted to say based on what Prashant had asked. Um, you know, there is a linkage between Rome's chariots and space shuttle program of USA. I was surprised to know what it was. There was a certain gauge of the distance between two wheels, which were used in Rome, because all their roads had a specific length, and so the wheels had to go perfectly. If the wheel, the difference between the wheels is different, then they cannot travel on the Rome roads. So it was mandated that all chariots in Rome, in Italy, in the Roman Empire, have wheels exactly the same distance, like your meter gauge or like your broad gauge. That was fixed. So what happened was when the car industry came, Fiat and others, when they had to put the vehicles on Rome roads, already the grooves were there. So the distance was fixed based on the pre-existing grooves. So the rail, when the train came, they used the same gauge. So finally, when satellites and the space shuttle and others were designed, they had to go on the same tracks, railway tracks. So the railway track gauge is exactly what is there in the Rome streets. So what happened in history has resonance even in today's technology. So I was telling him that the progression that we have done, if you forget it, then again you have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody will come and teach you from outside. I think we should not lose the connection. That is a small story I wanted to say. Chitrali ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Balasubramaniam, sir. Balasubramaniam, he reinvented the old iron, in the high process and the same system, corrosion-free, rust-free iron. That's only by studying the old iron only.
Okay.
So that's reintroduced in the world. Phosphoric iron.
Excellent. I think this coronavirus has actually taught us to go back to our roots and rediscover our heritage. Yeah. Chitrali ji, please go ahead, ask.
Namaskar, sir. It's a wonderful presentation. Learned a lot of new things. I was wondering whether what is the benefit that these northern historians are deriving out of giving the credit to these Baburs and all, and taking away the credit from the Deccan. Such flourishing know-how, technological know-how that the Deccan had. And second thing, that is it only Lutyens' lobby that is trying to take away the credit, or is it otherwise in general the northern historians who are doing it?
It's a kind of lobby. They wanted to centralize only on northern India, not to allow Deccan to South India to penetrate. So their study, everything is centralized in northern India. They never speak. I did my 3 refresher courses in Aligarh Muslim University. There was no single lecture on Deccan. There was no single lecture on South Indian history. We teach only South Indian history there. When I asked, no, you study yourself, you develop your Deccan history. Such a way is telling. When actually Harun Khan Sherwani, he dedicated for Deccan studies. Joshi, he is dedicated to Deccan studies. But they never penetrated into northern India. See this?
Sir, have you... Sir, have you studied or is there any evidence of using such cannons or such type of equipments in the Ahom kingdom?
Yeah. See, Taranath mentioned that that came from Ahoms, but there is no proper evidence. That's mentioned only by Taranath, cannons being used by Ahoms. But there is no proper evidence. So, in that context, we are keeping quiet. So here the forge-welded cannons are seen in Deccan forts. Forge-welded iron cannons being used by several kingdoms, even Bahmani and particularly Vijayanagara. They started using. So
Sir, what do you
Ahoms,
think? What do you think is the remedy to stop this lobbying and stop this concentration of only northern and not giving the the credit to the Deccan, and just how to rise above these north and south so far as the country's history is concerned? It's very petty. It's very petty. So,
very,
what is
very
your
big.
way out? Well, what is your way out as an intellectual, as an expert in this subject? Have
Yeah,
you
Giridhar Garu
been
has to
able
tell
to
us.
request the government?
Only Giridhar Garu has to tell us something about this. I can't say. Because they are dominating.
So now what we are
Irfan Habib, Harman Sumkya, D.D. Kosami, what they wrote, that's the right history. Romila Thapar. We write whatever we. Yeah. Even
So
Indian
in
National
fact, she
Congress
comes
being
from
dominated by them.
Chitrali ji comes from Assam. She's an Assamese.
That's why she was asking Ahoms.
Ahoms,
That's
yeah.
what I'm telling you.
The thing is, Assam Ahom kings are the only kings who defeated Mughals. Mughals could not conquer Ahoms, and that is never taught to us. You know, every year, even in our southern Indian textbooks, they teach 1 year Babur, 1 year Akbar, 1 year Jahangir, 1 year, you know, all these fellows. But they never tell you that Ahoms had defeated them, and they completely finished the entire Mughal army. Lachit Barphukan, his statue is there in Assam Rifles even today. In the Assam Rifles regiment, outside there is Lachit Barphukan's statue is there. But nowhere in the North India or South India it is ever taught. So I think what you said is right, sir. That lobby sitting in Delhi, they are dictating how the narrative in the country has to be. So Chitrali, the point is organizations like us, we are trying to bring it out. You know, we did a 2-day program of Telangana Vaibhavam, where we brought out such unknown facts about Telangana to our own people. See, I studied in a place called Warangal. Warangal was the headquarters of Kakatiya Empire.
Yeah.
There is no mention of Kakatiya kingdom in my textbooks, right? And I'm sitting there. So that is a sad part of it. That is how our textbooks, and my textbook is decided by NCERT sitting in Delhi. But I read that. The point is that we cannot wait for the government to respond. Government is apathetic. They don't care. As citizens, can we do something? As organizations, can we do something? That is the reason why today you even have Jai Kishan ji sitting on the call today. We are trying to bring out these aspects of our history, the glorious part of the history, which otherwise you will not find anywhere. We are, as an organization, we are trying to bring it out in a small way.
May I tell you one thing?
Everybody else should do it. All organizations should come forward and then propagate these things.
May I tell you one thing? See, Karimnagar, actually, Kotlingala is a center for Shatavahanas. The excavation revealed that pre-Shatavahana kingdom was there, existing. The pre-Shatavahana kings, at about 6 or 7 came out, but they did not do complete excavations there yet. Now it's submerged in the waters of the Sripasagar. There's a fate of Telangana archaeology. See, there they found several thousands of coins of 28 kings, and pre-Shatavahana kings also there. These kings were known as Shatavahanas, mentioned as Andhra Vrchas. Means Andhra kings were ruling earlier to them. So there is no mention of Shatavahanas, there is no mention of early Shatavahana kings. And coinage came earlier to that. Even before Ashoka, the minting has started in South India. The credit goes only central. That's why they are fear of that. Their history will be changed. That's what Athrinchikera, Lothal, that's Kalibangan. They speak about those things. Ahar, these places they speak about. But several places in South India are being excavated. Even there was a lobby not to excavate in Tamil Nadu. Ultimately, Tamil Nadu government has taken steps to excavate those sites. It's a very wonderful thing.
Field D and all of that.
Thank you.
but the thing is, Jagishanji, you know, I think this is a political issue. Politically, they wanted Telangana, but they never bother about the Telangana's culture and glory. So it is just one family which has managed to get it, and you know they are ruling it. The people's sentiment has been hijacked. But if they are really serious about the Telangana culture, like what you said, probably they should have really invested a hell of a lot in archaeology in this place. It yielded so rich, whole thing, you know.
Hoping days to come.
Yeah, sure.
The lots of
thanks, Chitraliji. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, sir.
You know, one second. I think there are two more people to ask. I'll Prashant ji. Prashant, I'll come back to you. Gopal ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, the discussion is very good. He was telling about the canonical canons and happening here. The thing is here, that India has got a very rich history. And we all know that we are proud of our history. And one thing I notice is whatever we invented, we don't have any patents on them. Like Arjuna has sent any astras, we don't have patents on the astras. If you have a bow and arrow, the arrow has got a specific patent. We don't have it. For what purpose is this patent invented? Who invented? We don't have any patents which used in the South India. And North India is meant for the management. South India is meant for the Karambhumi. So South India always be a workers and North India always be management. This mind thought made of textbooks has been spoiled like anything. We only see Jhansi Ki Rani. We never see Rudrama Devi in the textbooks. So once the textbook should teach us how to create a patent of what we invent. Once we create the patents, then the property lies with India. Else, Malaysia will say that, okay, the Sona Masood rice belongs to us. The patent belongs to us, they will tell. How to control these things? Any suggestions from your side, sir?
I can't suggest Giridhar sir should tell all these things, you know, about the patents and all these things. No, I didn't have any knowledge about all these things.
Yeah.
Giridhar sir, please answer.
Yeah, I mean, see, obviously it has to be proved that there was Agnyastra and, you know, Vayuastra and all are there.
Yeah.
It is there in the textbooks, but somebody has to demonstrate it again before you can.
Yeah, we can demonstrate. It is not a big thing.
Yeah,
No,
yes, we can demonstrate.
Unless that is done. Actually, we have one, person called CSR Prabhu, Dr. CSR Prabhu. He was the former director of NIC, National Informatics Center. He has done some research on Vimana Shastra. His videos are also
Bharadwaja.
Bharadwaja Vimana Shastra. Only some portions of it is available. Rest is all gone now. So based on the description, he produced an alloy, and that alloy is able to withstand UV and X-ray, rays and all. So probably that material was used in Vimanas, where you have, once you cross a certain stratosphere, you will encounter these kinds of rays. You know, to protect them, this metal, that alloy was very useful. So he actually demonstrated in a lab that they are not talking out of the hat. There is basis on which this Shastra was spoken about. So a hell lot of research is needed at our end. Somebody in Europe or America will research, they will send a report and they'll patent it. Whereas we are not doing it. All our universities are certificate manufacturing industries. Nobody is doing any research. Original research is dead in this country. We have been trained by Macaulay and their successors in the after post-independence governments to create labor force. We are not masters. We are not supposed to be masters. Just not in South India, even North India. Across the country, we are creating labor force. We are not creating original thinkers, entrepreneurs and researchers.
Yes, we are slaves like that. The slavery mentality build up.
But our education system is monitored by the British people, and they given us what we should learn, what we should do, but they never teach us what we should invent and how to invent.
They stopped us from inventing. That is the issue. They stopped us from inventing.
Yes.
So Anyway, see, that is an area where it's a big question mark. It's just not confined to archaeology. It is confined to, I mean, every other aspect, they have really ruined it. So,
yes, today, as last time they claimed Sona Masuri belongs to Malaysia. Then what about Telangana people who prepare Sona Masuri from Kannur rice, which we get from us?
yeah, that is a sad part of it. Yeah, thank you. And next is, I think Prashant, you wanted to ask another question. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So my question is the same thing I think Arnav sir asked, I guess. So basically what my thing is, we are saying that we are producing more labor than the, inventors or more, researchers. So the same thing China is also, like when we have independence on 1947, at the same time they got the independence too. So from then on, they are developed more labor than us, and we are also same on the same track. But at the same time, they produce a lot many books, lot many researchers, lot many reverse engineering stuff and all those. When China can able to do it, why can't we? And why our system is lacking on that? And at the same time, US is developed because they have a technology, and at the same time they have all the things on the books, and people can able to easily access those. People can able to easily get the stuff they need. And why India is lacking that, and I mean, what we have to do, and what we have to teach to the new generation like us.
Actually, particularly if you go to Japan or Korea, South Korea, or other countries, they have separate museums, archaeometallurgy museum, cotton industry development museum, like that. Every subject they have museums, and children are taken to those museums, and they have given tasks there. They have explained everything. First, they make a show, audiovisual show. Then afterwards, they proceed into the museum. So after that, they will be given assignment. They will do the work. Here, there are no such a kind of teaching in anything here in our country. There is no single archaeometallurgy museum or science and technological museum. There is no such a museum at all, particularly devoted to particular kind of work. See, cotton industry, particularly weaving industry, is very famous in India. In different areas, different types of weavings, technologies are there, all are invented within the country. Particularly, go to Pochampalli, Ikat sarees. See, these things has to be taught to our people. How our survival has become more important for those industries, particularly in early medieval period, just based upon only industry. The continue only because of the strict, they followed the rules of production system. They did not deviate it from that. So education, everything learning out of that only. They did not become scholars like others. So these things should be brought to the educational system first. Who are there to introduce all these things? If you go to Telugu literature, if you go to Hindi or any science and technology, only modern things they teach you, but not about ancient teachings. How the script has developed. Nobody knew about Brahmi script. Nobody is there to read in South India, particularly in Telangana. Nobody is there to read and decipher that Brahmi inscriptions or evolution of the inscriptional studies. There are several things, not one, two. Government has to take steps to introduce different types of educational system, not one in what you call BA, the intermediate degree, PG. There is a matter. Where do they go? Really, they are not technically built up. Unless until they build up with the technology, science and technology, the study will be different. Because people are very much interested in studies. They do miracles. Students are there, youth is there. But nobody is there to help them.
Yeah, I may just add here two more aspects, Jagishanji. See, one is on an average, America in USA, 50,000 patents are registered every year. Prashantji,
Yeah.
50,000 patents are registered in USA per year. In Japan, 25,000 patents are registered. In China, 14,000 patents are registered. In India, per year, average, I'm talking about average, we register 1,400 patents. 1,400. We are just 10% of the patents produced by original patents produced by China. So the problem is we are producing labor force. China is able to get into the next stage of innovation. Maybe they have stolen a lot of technology from USA, agreed. But now they are able to produce original technology. They are investing in their thing. The problem is, I think Nagesh said, we are software coolies. It is correct. We are software coolies. The problem is, there is actually a research in linguistic studies. Pragya Bharati conducted a 2-day program on linguistic studies, languages. All the countries which have adopted a foreign language as their medium of instruction, their human development index is low. We have adopted English. Latin America adopted Spanish and Portuguese. Similarly, African countries, they have adopted Arabic. These are all alien, languages to them. All of us are in bottom of the human development index. But countries which have invested in technology, in education in their own field, China is able to produce all these patents. Japan is able to produce patents in their language. They are not producing in English. They are producing in Japanese, they are producing in Chinese, Korean, German. So can we do a PhD in Telugu today? We cannot. If you want to do engineering metallurgical PhD, you need to know English. Otherwise, you cannot do in India. If the day when you can start doing it in Telugu, that is when we will be able to produce originality. Unless till then, what Nagesh said, we are only software coolies. We are technology coolies. That is, education system is a problem. So archaeology and such subjects would give us pride in our culture. So they have systematically killed our pride in our culture, and we've been made to think that we are only made to go and serve some Western corporation. That's it. At the end of IIT 4th year, what do I want? I need a green card and go work in Apple, Cisco, or Kellogg's or somewhere. And nobody wants to come and do anything here. If I do a post graduation in archaeology, will I get a job? I will not get a job. I'll have to go to a bank and sell credit cards, right? So that is a sad part of it. But anyway, I think Jagishanji, it was wonderful. I think the work that you have done is amazing. It is just a sad part that we are simply unable to pass it on to the next generation. The same zeal in which research has to be done. We are producing so many PhDs. It's all copy, cut and paste, but no original research is happening. And I'm afraid even in the new education policy, which the proposed draft has come, they're saying every lecturer has to do a PhD. Without a PhD, you will not even be a lecturer. You can imagine it's completely going to be diluted. The concept of PhD will be like any other degree. Sadly, I think we are killing our standards. But we are
No. We can strengthen this also by taking stringent measures. Now already UGC has taken now. See, thesis should be submitted in soft copy, and that will be studied by several people, and they give remarks, and plagiarism also studied in that. So there are several measurements taken by the UGC. Yes. So you can hope some good things may come out.
Well, actually, there are enough technology, enough apps today where I can fool the plagiarism tools. How to escape the plagiarism tool. There are people have developed those technology also. We are very innovative in trying to fool people. creating originality. Anyway, thank you so much, sir.
Right, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
I think we'll, I don't know, Chandrasekhar ji is there or not. I think he's.
Thank everybody.
Battery was running out. I think he's left. So anyway, thank you so much, Jagkishan ji, and we are really proud of the work that you have done, and we hope that this shall remain, matter of what do you say, a lot of research material for the generations to come, and inspiration for what you have done should be passed on to the next generations. And we wish you all the very best. And thank you for again coming onto our platform a second time around. We hope to bring you as many times as we can really bring in. Our idea is to spread this message across.
Okay, and, I'm ready to. Not only one, I'm only one on this topic. In various topics also I can speak.
Sure.
I give the poem.
Definitely, sir. Definitely.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you all rest of the audience who have been very patient and been cooperative and encouraging us all the time. Thank you one and all. Namaste. Namaste. Bharat Mata ki jai.